The green comet, or the 2022 E3 Comet, whatever that means. So I'm gonna share with you guys how I took pictures of it. Now, I didn't have anything fancy or special to do this. I didn't even have a telescope. I just used my camera, which is my trusty Sony a6300. This 100 to 300 millimeter Canon telephoto lens. This is a Canon EF lens from the early 90s, and I use a adapter to be able to put it onto my Sony camera. But overall, it's a great lens. I only spent like 80 bucks on it, and it's cool to have something like that to be able to take pictures of these space objects when they, come around, or stuff like eclipses. And then for help locating the comet, I used a green laser pointer. And obviously I had my camera on a tripod, but that's pretty much all the gear. Just goes to show you don't necessarily need a telescope to do this stuff. Really, for me personally, I just look at a telescope as a giant camera lens. Because if you were to just look through this at a telescope, you would have been disappointed. You're not gonna see anything green. You're just gonna see a little white blur. The reason for that is, with what we see through a telescope or what we see with the naked eye, we're just seeing the light that's coming in real time. And obviously these things are really far away, light years. Like, this comet wasn't light years away, but stuff's far away. With the camera, you have the ability to use a long exposure, which is a camera setting where basically you can set the amount of time that the camera sensor is gonna gather light. So on my best image, in particular, I used a 8-second exposure, which means that the light that was hitting this lens was passing through and going into my camera for 8 seconds, whereas the human eye would just see in real time. So that's why a camera is so important for this. It's able to capture that light and all that data and then ultimately put that onto an image. So that's why cameras are really better than telescopes. So really, a telescope is just a lens. That is how I see it. Now, for actually finding the comet, I used a few different resources, but the skylive.com, and I'll leave a link to it in the description. It's a great resource. The website has a few different pages where you can select different objects that would be in the sky. You can also select your location. And what's really cool about it is there's this planetarium feature, which I used to help me find the comet. And basically it gives you like a 3D mapping of the sky. And it's really cool. So basically from there, I was able to see where the comet would be, like what constellation it would be passing through. I just needed to use my green laser pointer to find it within the constellation based on what I was seeing from the application. Just kind of put the green laser pointer where it should be. And then I was using the laser pointer sort of lined up with my camera and camera lens. That way the shots that I would be taking would be pretty close to having the comet in the frame. I still had about 3 or 4 pictures where I had to kind of recenter and get it in the middle of the frame, but that's not that bad. And overall, for only having to go 10-15 minutes outside of town from a really big, bright city, you don't have to upend your life to do this kind of thing necessarily. Now, another thing to keep in mind is, and this is for any stargazing, the moonlight. You might have heard about this comet through like a local news story or something like that. And a lot of them were saying like, oh, February 1st to 2nd, the night of, is going to be the best time to see it because it'll be at its closest. And it's like, actually, no, it's not going to be the best time because the moon is going to be out really late that night. The glow from the moon is just as bright as the glow from a big city. And that'll just drown out your photos and kind of limit what you're able to see. Okay, now another thing with astrophotography specifically is that the post-processing and the editing is a really big part of it. People might think that you just snap the button and take these pictures, but that's not the case at all. There's probably usually at least 30 minutes of processing that goes into it. And some of that is just kind of experimenting with the different settings and seeing what I like best. But personally, the majority of my editing is done in Camera Raw, which is a Photoshop plugin. I don't use Lightroom, I just don't really like it. The thing about Camera Raw that I like the most for deep space photography is that you have the ability to adjust the hue and saturation and luminance on each individual color channel. Now maybe Lightroom's added that, but I don't think so. Maybe they have, I don't know. But that's really important. For example, with this comet, it's supposed to be green. So I'm able to bump up the saturation of just the greens or just the aquas, or shift the aquas towards green. And that'll just really help like bring out the image and bring out those colors that you're trying to accentuate. Whereas if you just bump up the overall saturation, it's gonna make the image look a lot grainier and just it's gonna bring out some weird color fringing and just colors that you don't want necessarily, especially in the background of the image where there's a lot of noise. And that's even more prevalent when you have skies that are very light polluted, or you're in a city with a big light dome over you, like where I am. So basically what I did is I bumped up the color temperature a bit. I think it was around 4,000 out of the camera, and I liked it better around 45. I prefer a slightly warmer image. The exposure, as you can see, at 0. It's a faint comet. You can tell it's there, but it's not like it is here at 2. But if you take it up too high to like 3, 4, or 5, it just starts looking ridiculous. It's drowned out. There's a lot of color artifacts and noise, so I think right around 2 there is good. Hey, one thing real quick, if you're enjoying the video, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it, and it helps me grow the channel a lot. Slight adjustments on the texture and dehaze functions there, and then took the aquas, made them more green, and then just did some very light saturation on the greens and aquas only. And that's it. From there, I just opened it straight into Photoshop, where I made my final crop of the photo. All right, so ultimately here you can see the before and after. This is with no adjustments, and this is with the adjustments. It is what it is, but nonetheless, I think it's cool just to show the process and show you guys what exactly it entails. Alright, I had a lot of fun doing this project and making the video. I hope that you learned something or found it interesting. Thank you for watching. Bye.